Of course, he's an Iowa graduate. His career has taken him from Kinnick Stadium to the bright lights of Wrestlemania. Big E, as he's known to his legions of fans, is one of WWE's biggest stars thanks to his magnetic charisma and Herculean power. The Tampa, Florida native lettered for the Iowa football program in 2006 and saw action in 11 games on the defensive line before some injuries derailed his college career. He did earn a degree in the health and sports studies from Iowa in 2006 and began graduate school before an unexpected path opened to pro wrestling, obviously what he's doing now. Since joining the WWE's developmental division in 2009 and then debuting the main roster in 2012, Big E has become a multi-time tag team and intercontinental champion. All right, so Big E is now using his platform to put a spotlight on Black history. He's developing a new animated series titled Our Heroes Rock that will celebrate historical figures like Ruby Bridges, Medgar Evers, and Ida B. Wells. So again, Big E, thank you for being here, man. How you doing? What's going on?
My pleasure, man. Thank you for that just wonderful, beautiful, flowery opening. I appreciate it. But no, it's good to talk to you, man.
No doubt. So the first question that I have that the fans want to know, man. So you're from Florida. It's nice and hot. From Tampa, Florida. It's nice and hot down there. What brought you to the Midwest, to the cold, to Iowa football program in Iowa City?
So I had no business getting the Iowa offer. So my story is a little convoluted. I'm sure pretty different from most, D1 athletes. So I always wanted to play football. That was my first love since I was a little kid. But my parents ended up enrolling me in a private school called Tampa Prep. An incredible school. I'm so grateful for everything I learned there, even though, I decided to not use my intellect whatsoever in my job, but it taught me many things. But Tampa Prep didn't have a football team. So from 6th grade through 11th grade, I was enrolled at Tampa Prep. And it was a blessing in disguise because it became too expensive. And my senior year, I had to transfer. And it could have been a bummer because it was a great school. I had some friends there for sure. But, I was excited by the opportunity to play football. And that's something I got to do. So I transferred to Wharton, which is a public school, much closer to my parents' house too. And I played football at Wharton. And I know for most people, as you know, your junior year is a really critical year for getting recruited.
Yep.
And, I played youth football back when I was like from age 7 to 10 or 11. But that's a long time with playing no football. And I had wrestled. I was a state champion as a junior in high school, but I hadn't played football until my senior year. And I'm also a guy, mind you, I was a defensive tackle at maybe 5'11". I played my senior year at 230 pounds. I had a job at Wendy's right after the season ended. And all I was doing, I would lift. I was having these absurd 4-hour lifting sessions. Or I had a weightlifting class in the morning, and then at lunch, I would lift for another half an hour while I could. I would go through the rest of my classes. I'd come back, do some agility and lifting. All I was doing was eating Wendy's and lifting and just putting on size. So I ended up, when I graduated, I think the end of that senior year, I played at around 230, 235. And then by the time I graduated, I was 275. And not a sloppy 275. I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I was putting on size and lifting hard. So yeah. But essentially the reason I ended up at Iowa was because Phil Parker, who is it's kind of crazy to me to look at the staff. I'm talking about my senior year in high school was 2004. I'm old now. So the fact that, Coach Parker, Phil was recruiting, he was the head of recruiting in Florida then in 2004. All these years later, still with the program is incredible. But so the way it worked out is I pretty much didn't have any offers of note. I think I might have had Lehigh and Lafayette. I took a visit to either both or one. But anyways, they're in the same town pretty much. I took one visit, did some unofficials, but Pittsburgh State, which I think is D2, they offered me, but there wasn't much going on. But the way it worked out at Wharton was you had the weight room. There was a weight room at my high school, and the coach's office, the head coach's office, is attached to the weight room. So Coach Parker is in there looking for juniors, upcoming seniors, guys a year younger than me. and he has to walk through the weight room to go to talk to my coach, Melvin Cunningham, at the time. And I think I might have been the only person in the weight room. I think I was, or maybe like one other person. But I'm in there, and I remember, like, I've just told the story so many times. I was benching 315 for like a set of 10. 315 for a set of 10 as he's walking in, and it gets his attention. I don't think he said anything to me at the time, but he goes in and talks to my coach and asks, like, hey, who was that kid in there benching 315 for a set of 10? And then our talks went from there. But so much about that feels so serendipitous, because I always think, like, what if I had just been working out because the season's over? What if I was working out elsewhere? What if I had stepped out to use the bathroom? What if I was sick that day? You know, so much. If I wasn't in that position at that time, I don't end up at Iowa. I probably end up trying to walk on, because that was my goal, actually, is I had an academic ride from the University of Florida, but like I wasn't a preferred walk on or anything. So I was just going to hope to try out and walk on at Florida, and like, you know, and who knows how that goes for me. So I was extremely lucky. But man, there's so many other things that just opened my eyes to like how blessed I am, because my defensive line coach in high school was like a father figure in many ways. Like, he just always looked out for me. He trained me. Vincent Davis, just an incredible human being, and just someone who really guided me on the field too. But he was someone, like, during the summer, we went out and we would just work out together. Like, we would do hand drills and D-line drills, and he just always looked out for me. But anyways, he ended up, we didn't even realize this until Coach Aiken came down to talk to him, but he played for Coach Aiken. Coach Aiken was the D-line coach for Iowa at the time, but he played for Coach Aiken at a small school called Tarkio. And coincidentally, Boogeyman, who was a wrestler in WWE many years ago, also played for Coach Aiken at Tarkio. So it's like mind blowing. This one man at this tiny college, the fact that it, you know, for me, so many things just lined up. If I wasn't there, you know, in the weight room at that time, if my defensive line coach was someone else, you know, it just so many things that lined up for me that just made it clear that Iowa was the place that I was supposed to be. So sorry, that was a very long-winded way to answer, but the story for me is so wild and so coincidental. You know, I'm not like a lot of guys who were like, you know, you knew their sophomore year they were going to play D1 ball. Like, I was a guy who, you know, by the grace of God, and, you know, there being an opening in that upcoming class, because a lot of teams just don't have a scholarship to offer. You know, like, even if we love you, sorry, man, by that time, the end of the season, your senior year, it's usually, you know, I'm sorry, we got nothing for you. But I was really fortunate, you know, extremely fortunate.
Of course, man. And again, right time, right place, right? Happy that you were there. Because as you said, you could have went to Florida and walked on, and we would have known the story and the legacy of Big E. Something real quick. So my recruiting story, and I know this is about you, but it kind of lines up to like, hey, just like you just never know. I did not think that I was going to college, or I was good enough to play college football as well. So sophomore year at my high school, what they would do for any sophomores who are up and coming, they would bring those guys to the varsity level just so you can get some practice reps, right? And so they brought me up at the end of the year, and at the end of the season, my head football coach comes to me and he's like, so Broderick, you know what? Like, I think you're going to be playing on Saturdays one day. And so I said, okay, Saturday. So I went home and I told my mom, I said, Mom, Coach said I'm going to be playing JV, you know, because, you know, the JV games are on Saturday. So I wasn't even thinking he was talking about college.
Right.
I'm thinking he's like, hey, bro, you're good enough to play JV, and that's it. You know? So,
that's wild.
Again, I didn't think I was college material either, but look at us now. So next question, man. So, okay, Kinnick Stadium, historic Kinnick Stadium. What were your some of your best memories, your fond memories of playing in Kinnick Stadium, or I guess in your playing career?
Man, so I was only on the field active my redshirt sophomore year because I had a bunch of injuries. You know, my first camp at Iowa, my true freshman year, I tore my left ACL. Next year, I tear my right ACL. You know, broke my patella, tore my left pec, all in 2.5 years. So my redshirt sophomore year, the regular season was the only time I was actually healthy. And I remember, man, that 06 season, I remember we were at Kinnick when we played Ohio State, who was #1 in the nation. And I remember game day, comes down. Of course, you're preparing as a player, so you don't really get to see all of that. But I just remember the excitement and that buzz, that feeling in the air that whole week. And that's such a cool experience to know you're on the field playing in these meaningful games. I was never a starter, but I was always in that D-line rotation. So I was always getting reps. And that's what I remember as far as playing at Kinnick. But I also remember, man, I remember that first time, even though I was hurt before the season started, I remember walking over from Hillcrest. I'd walk over from the dorms to the stadium, and they set up a chair for me so I could kind of sit there and watch. But just seeing this absolute sea of humanity all the way from the hospital, in the streets, just people lined up. And as someone who has always loved college football, like still, college football is the one thing that makes me feel like a kid again. Like it gives you that feeling inside. I just love the game as a fan. To feel that atmosphere. And at the time, I think Iowa had just finished 8th in the country. They just came off the Florida win in 2003. I think they beat Florida in the bowl game. I want to say it was that year that Robert Galley was just taken number 2 overall. Like the hype going into that season in 2004 and that buzz, man, it just really opened my eyes to what an incredible football town Iowa City is, and the amount of love you get made me feel like, man, this is where I want to play my college football. This is the experience I want to have, because that's what I think of. As much as you think of like USC and UCLA, they play in LA or Miami, playing in these big cities. Like, I'm sure that's cool too. But to me, the true essence of college football is a town like Iowa City, where just everyone just shuts up. They shut down shop. Everyone says, hey, this is our team. These are our guys. And not just the town, man, the whole state. So that to me is like, I'm glad, even though my career didn't go the way I wanted it to, I feel like I got to have that really incredible, rich experience with what a college town and a town that loves college football and their team is really like.
No doubt. You brought up the 2006 game. That was actually my official visit. So when you talk about electricity, you talk about game day, man, I had heart palpitations, even though I was in the stands. Like, yo, I want to swarm out. Like, yo, this is great, the electricity. So I know exactly what you're talking about, man. So because of that game, I chose Iowa. Like,
man, that's incredible.
Even though like we didn't have to win the game, but the fans were electric. The place was on fire. It was fantastic, man. So great. So next question we have, man. So in what ways did Iowa prepare you for your career right now?
Man, it's in so many ways. Obviously, what we do now is pretty different, but I learned how to work hard, man. You know as good as anyone, you know what it's like, man. I remember there were times I was actually looking at my schedule. I was just thinking back to, man, because I was in rehab all the time, man. I remember sometimes I'd have to wake up you're talking about like waking up at like 4:30, 5 a.m., going straight over to do rehab. We go from rehab to workouts to a full slate of classes, especially my true freshman year. It was legit, like, wake up at 4:35 and your whole day is booked out. As soon as classes are over, get something to eat, come right over, doing more rehab meetings. Even though I wasn't playing, you're there. Like, I remember how hard I had to work. And that wasn't like, no one pats you on the back and says, great job for working hard. That's the expectation. Same thing. Like with the summer, man, like you don't get a pat on the back for showing up for summer workouts. And you know what I mean? No one's giving you a cookie for that, because that's the bare minimum, is showing up, working hard, being in shape. So that's one of the things that it really just prepared me for that. Like, I feel like as difficult as it can be with our schedule, being on the road and being gone so much, in the rigors of professional wrestling and the job, like, to me, I don't think you're ever going to give me a more difficult experience than playing football at the University of Iowa, because the amount of work and effort that went into, just trying to get on the field, man, is incredible. So that's what I really learned, is work and discipline above all else.
Of course, we all learn that, man. It's the norm. It's no one pats you on the back for doing things that you should do, right? And working hard is one of those things. And as we know, that winter program, that summer program, man, that's when you make those big gains. That's when it's hot out there, but you still do it. So
exactly.
Shifting career, topics to more of your career, right? So how did you get started in the WWE?
Again, this is another story where like it shouldn't have happened. I should never have been here. If you asked me at the age of 22 to list 200 jobs, potential jobs, I guarantee you professional wrestler would not be on that list. So essentially what had happened is, like I said, I had a bunch of injuries in college. I ended up, actually that '06 season was my last. During bowl prep, I broke my patella, tore my patella tendon, and man, the medical team really advised me like, hey, you might want to consider wrapping up. And honestly, I knew within myself, it really didn't take much, pushing either, because as much as I loved the game and wanted to play, man, it just had, for some reason, I don't know why, I had never really had any injuries up until then. And even after, man, in the 12 years I've been with WWE, I've had a herniated disc, which I didn't need surgery for. I was fine in 2 weeks. And then I had a meniscus surgery, which I was out for 6 weeks with that. So in 12 years, that's all I had. But for me, I just realized like, hey, it's not going the way I wanted it to. And it was hard, man. It was really hard. But I ended up finishing up. And thankfully, everyone was incredible. And they allowed me to still keep my scholarship. So I ended up staying on scholarship. And I finished my degree. I was still around the program. Thankfully, at the time, Coach Joel was still letting me come around. I was still working out. So that's why a lot of times I can't remember younger guys. Like, I was like, did we play together? I don't know if you and I played together because I was still around. Like, I wasn't a coach. I wasn't really heavily involved, but I was still coming. I'd be in the building lifting, 4 to 5 days a week. So I would still see guys like you in passing. But for me, it was finishing my degree. And then I had an incredible professor, Professor Parrott, who many of us had at the time too. And she just randomly, I was at a point where I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I came into Iowa thinking I was pre-med, and I started pre-med. And then I very quickly realized this is not for me, because it was not easy, man. It was not easy. But I ended up switching my major, and I just didn't know, I was kind of, I don't know if lost is the right word, but at the time my plan was just, hey, like I'll graduate, I'll go back to Tampa, live with my folks for a little bit, just get a job, and then kind of figure out where I want to go from there. But Professor Parrott pulled me aside one day and said, hey, have you ever considered grad school? And it was something that I hadn't really, I was very thankful that I didn't have any school debt because of my scholarship. But she said, and that was kind of a concern of mine with grad school, is the expense. And she said, you know what, actually, you could come on as a TA and not have to worry about it. So, and that was the beautiful thing. So I actually gave it some more thought, and I thought, hey, let me give this a shot. So it feels very weird for me now thinking about, but at one point, I led some discussion groups, and I was grading papers on a university campus at 22, 23. But essentially what happened is, because I was still coming around the program, I was still in the weight room, I think maybe the year before, Mike Humple was drafted by the Steelers. He played with the Steelers for a little bit, and he had a back injury. Unfortunately, his career came to an end. But Hump and I would still kind of lift around the same times, and he ended up becoming friends with Mike Doherty. And Mike Doherty ended up meeting Jim Ross with WWE. He's no longer with WWE, but at the time, he had been with WWE for a long time. And at the time, JR was just kind of a guy who was trying to find scouts. And he randomly met Mike on a plane they had the same flight, and then had the next flight together, ended up talking. And because Mike was so close with the Iowa wrestling program, JR pretty much told him like, hey, if there are any guys who are done with their amateur wrestling careers at Iowa who want to get into pro wrestling, let me know. So he was kind of a liaison. It was never intended to be for former football players, but because Hump was still around and we were still talking, and Hump was friends with Mike, he just randomly threw it out at me, and I gave it some thought, and it sounded really cool. And we said, hey, let's just give it a shot. It's a long shot. Who knows? But we first started with, they had me send some topless photos just so they have an idea of what my physique looks like. So I remember just being, and at the time, this is still like pretty new to me. It's weird, but I'm taking these pictures, sending them to WWE at the time back in 2009 during that summer, and just kind of going from there. And then I hear back from them like, hey, we want to send you down to Tampa for a tryout. And at the time, Tampa was where FCW was. And FCW is like the minor league system, or was the minor league system for WWE. And that when guys got signed, they came down to FCW, they trained for a bit, and then eventually you hope to get called up to the main roster, to WWE, to be on the road, to be a superstar and all that jazz. But the thing is, with getting signed and being in FCW, there are no guarantees. It's definitely less than half of the people who were in FCW came out and had careers in the main roster. So, a lot of guys didn't last too long. So my tryout went well enough that they eventually brought me on. I got hired, and I thought, you know what, worst case scenario is I talked to the people in grad school, and it was essentially like, hey, you can come back, but your credits, I remember being told your credits will expire after 10 years. Because I was halfway through my master's, and I thought, you know what, there's a good chance I'll be back in a year or so, but let's just give it a shot. And I was nervous, man. I didn't know if I could do this for a living, but I had fun on the tryout, and I thought maybe this is something that I could enjoy doing. And it's hard to believe, man. It's almost we're like a month away from being 12 years later, just taking a job on a whim, and I guess things worked out.
That's crazy, man. So for the people on the call that might not be so big into wrestling, like what's one thing that the general public maybe doesn't know or doesn't understand about wrestling? Like what's one thing you got?
Well, it's not nearly as glamorous as people think. You're on television for sure, but and things have changed now because of the pandemic. But my first 7 years on the main roster, man, we're like, when I first started, we were doing 5 shows a week. Every single week with no real break. So that means, I'm on the road. I'm leaving on a Friday morning. I was leaving on a Friday morning, and we'd have a show that same day. So you get into town, you GPS a gym, a place to get some food. You go to work out, you get some food, and then you go do these live events. And we would do these untelevised live events. And typically we would do 3. So we'd work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Sunday sometimes would be a pay-per-view, like once a month. But other than that, it'd be Friday, Saturday, Sunday for these untelevised live events. And then we work Monday Night Raw on Mondays. And then Tuesday, we'd film SmackDown. And then you go home Wednesday morning, you have a flight home. So that means you have a day and a half to catch up on your life, to pay your bills, to see family, whatever it is. And this is every single week. So it's a grind, man. And when I'm talking about 5 shows a week, it's not like we do 5 shows in the same town, or oftentimes not even in the same state. Is oftentimes, we have a limit of 300 miles. So you might have a show in one city, as long as the next town, the show for the next day is under 300 miles, you're driving. If it's over 300, they'll get you a flight. But oftentimes, there are times I've driven 5 hours. I've driven after a show, and I've seen the sun come up before I get to go to sleep. So, it was not easy. It's not easy being on the road that much, being gone all the time. And I tell people oftentimes that the wrestling is the easiest part. It's right. You have to deal with backstage politics. You have to deal with the travel. You have to deal with so many other things that come with the job too. You have days where, hey, you have to get up at 4 a.m. because you have Radio Row, or you have morning media to promote the shows. And so a lot of times it's sleeping an hour and a half, 2 hours, and doing the media or doing things. And it's, it's unpaid, but like that's an expectation. So there's a lot that goes into it. And I try to tell anyone who's pursuing a job or a career, if money is the only reason that you're doing it, man, I just think like you're gonna burn out soon, because I'm grateful to be comfortable and have a good living. But if I didn't love what I do, if I didn't, get that feeling like I'm fulfilled doing what I'm doing, I couldn't be doing it for 12 years. There's no way.
No doubt. And it's for the general public. Again, we might see you month to month on TV, but no one knows that, that's your 5th match, right, in 3 days or whatever it's been. So no doubt, appreciate that for cluing us in on that. So let's talk about a match, man. How do you prepare? Like, what do you eat? Like, how much sleep do you need for a match? What do you do to prepare for a match?
Man, everything for the most part is I tell people with what we do, it's kind of like jazz in some ways. There's some structure to it, but because we wrestle so often, there's a certain language too with guys. So oftentimes we wrestle so often that we don't necessarily need to rehearse for 2, 3 hours or to go over things. Is oftentimes it's just as far as preparation is concerned. There's a lot from my time in Iowa that I still take with me. In fact, I bought when the pandemic started, I bought an agility ladder and just started doing a lot of just for my cardio. I would do a lot of the drills that we learned at Iowa just for my cardio. So there's a lot of that. A lot of the stuff that I learned lifting at Iowa, I still implement now. As far as my diet's concerned, some guys are more strict than I am, but for me, this is a lifestyle. It's not like bodybuilding where you have 8 to 12 weeks and you have to be really specific. And then after that, you can relax. This is a lifestyle that I need to maintain for months and months and years. So for me, I cut out red meat as I got older. I do 6 meals a day. 2 of those meals are usually shakes. And then the others I really just love poke and sushi. So a lot of it is just like clean fish, brown rice, things of that nature. But yeah, man, we actually, I think people would be surprised at how little like actual rehearsal there is with what we do or going over stuff. Because when you wrestle, like we used to, when you're wrestling 5 days a week, that's essentially your practice, is your preparation time. So it's there's a lot of that for sure.
Very nice. And last question for your career. What are some of your favorite memories, or the favorite memory from your career? What's the favorite memory?
Man, it's hard to pick one. There's so many ones. So we, our tag team, in case people don't know, I've been in a group with my friends and my partners, my brothers, Kofi and Woods, since 2014. They just put us on different shows late, last year. But other than that, we've been together pretty much week in and week out for 6+ years. But, probably my favorite memory is we broke a record that had stood within the company for over 20 years. We held the tag team titles for 483 days, which like you don't get long runs like that nowadays. It's very difficult to do something like that. So I was very proud of what we did with that and just bringing something really unique and new to WWE at the time. So that's one that I'm definitely, breaking a record that stood for over 20 years and a company that's been around as long as WWE is something I'm proud of.
Very nice, man. And congrats on that. That is definitely huge. So let's go to out of the ring, right? So let's talk about it. So obviously you have big muscles, big chest, and that's one of the things that I remember. So I know we weren't teammates, but my first year was 2007. So I do remember seeing you lifting and being around the building. I was like, man, if I have to play against this guy, I'm gonna lose every time, right? Because you're a giant, man. But let's talk about lifting for a little bit. How much time do you spend lifting, and what does a typical workout look for you?
It's not actually as crazy as people think. I think people assume it's not like when I was younger, when I would actually be in the gym for 4 to 5 hours a day. Right now, I try to be more efficient. I'm not as young as I used to be, so I'm 35 now. So I spend more time with kind of just some prehab stuff. And, I foam roll. I'll usually start by foam rolling. I'll warm up, doing some elliptical stuff. But 4 days a week, I'm lifting. 2 days a week, I'm doing cardio. And then I like to have one off day. I might move around a little bit, might go for a walk. But other than that, I'm not really doing anything too intensive. I'm really blessed to have connected with, for a while, when we were in FCW, I was working out at John Cena's gym, which is actually not that far from where I live now. But Cena has his own private gym, and Rob McIntyre, they grew up together, they're best friends, but he's an incredible mind. And it was really cool, when you go from Iowa and that strength program, to me, when I was told like, hey, you're gonna be working out with this guy, I'm real skeptical because I know I've worked out with some of the best in the world. Let's see what you have to offer. And as soon as I heard him talk and see him put together a program, I was like, oh, he knows what he's talking about. Okay, he's on point. So Rob actually put together, he actually created this app called Mogy, M-O-G-Y, and it has all of my workouts in it. So that's the nice thing is I can just open up my phone, whatever city I'm in, I don't have to worry about it. And typically, a lot of the splits, it's not like a back day or an arm day necessarily, but like my back day might have 80% back with some trap stuff in there and some other extra work as well. But for the most part, it's kind of centered around muscle groups as well. And most of it is kind of around that powerlifting core where I'll really, there's a good amount of bench, squat, and deadlift because that's what I did for a little bit. And that's what I enjoy doing, even though my numbers are way down. When people talk about my strength, I was like, that's the old me. That's the old me because, man, when I was benching 575, I was probably 305, 310 pounds. I'm about 260 right now, and I don't plan on ever getting much heavier than that, man. So yeah, it's those days were fun, but those days are behind me.
No doubt, and I'm sure your knees are thanking you, man.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
That heavy, you can move around a little bit better. So this is kind of where our worlds come together, but DEI, right? So I know you're doing the animated series, Our Heroes Rock. So tell us a little bit about that, and then also tell us what you want to accomplish by having this series.
So really, I think for a while I'd had this lingering feeling that, I need to give back more. I need to do something. I'm blessed with this platform, with this opportunity. And what really kind of changed things was, for me, the murder of George Floyd. It felt kind of what I was going through was, I remember this feeling that I had never been so affected by the death of someone I had never met. I remember something, and I think a lot of it had to do with the pandemic, the fact that in previous times, it'd be like, this is really sad, but I'm distracted because I have to drive to the next town. I have a plane to hop on. But now I'm just confronted with this, and there's no escape. I'm at home, like, all of us were. I'm stuck at home and just dealing with these emotions, having these conversations with so many family members and Black friends of mine. And they talk about, their experience with the police or, just so many of these emotions. And I remember thinking, man, I just felt a hopeless feeling in many ways. Like, how can you demolish systemic racism? What can I do? I'm just one man. But I kept thinking, I might not be able to change the world fundamentally, but I can do something. Yeah. And so we decided to do a couple things, Kofi and I, just to show people that we were, hey man, I'm feeling the pain that you're feeling. I'm crying the way you're crying. Is, Kofi and I just took a knee and raised our fist in the ring on a SmackDown. And we had this really incredible artist. His Instagram name is DOROWOT. He might have changed it now, but anyways, he just painted this thing and said, hey, he painted us in the ring kneeling, did an incredible job and said, hey, I want to send this to you. And it's like, you know what? I'm kind of a minimalist. Like, I don't really hold on to things, but let's auction this off. So we auctioned it off and we sent the money to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. But we thought like, hey, let's make some shirts. So we made some shirts and we raised, I think at this point, we're over $14,000 that we were able to send to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And, I kept thinking one of the things that I love with wrestling is you can use your wrestling gear to express yourself. So a lot of times we, Kof Woods and I, in many ways we're nerds. So our love of video games, like we did Sonic the Hedgehog inspired gear. They just did some killer Power Rangers gear. So stuff in that vein. And I thought, and Jonathan Davenport, who's incredible, he's also local. He lives about 30 minutes from me. He's designed our gear since 2015. And he does incredible work. So I talked to Jonathan. I said, you know what? I just went on a walk one day and I thought, what if we did something akin to Schoolhouse Rock, but for important Black people? Because I think education is important. I think oftentimes Black history is just whittled down to, hey, we'll teach it in February. We'll talk to you about Rosa Parks and MLK, and then we'll move on. But man, I kept thinking, man, there's so much more to our history. And it's not just Black history that you confine and put in a box. It's American history. It's all of our history. And it's something that we need to teach year round and implement. And I just thought to, shout out to our teachers who I think are so overworked and do such a tremendous job. But I think in many ways, there's this hole in our curriculum. And like I said, I went to a great school, a really intensive prep school. And so many of these names I had never really heard of. People are talking about the Black Wall Street massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that just had its 100-year anniversary, and the fact that there are still survivors. There's, I think, a woman who's 107 years old who was just talking about her experience and her memories with dealing with that horrific experience. And there's so many of these stories and things that I didn't learn until maybe college, or I hadn't learned until this past year. And I thought, man, this is such a shame. What if we could find a way to do that for young people, to teach young people, instead of learning at 25, 30, 40 years old about these things, is to find an enjoyable, entertaining way to teach kids and to teach young people and adults as well about Black history and about our heroes. And that's why we've termed them our heroes, because they're not just people that you and I, Broderick, should look up to. They're people that we should all look up to. They're all of our heroes. And it was really my buddy Andreas Hale, who covers combat sports. He's been in hip hop. He's actually worked as an activist for many years. And he was the guy I was kind of leaning on after George Floyd and asking questions. And he actually came on our podcast and did an incredible job just talking with the three of us, our New Day podcast, New Day Feel the Power podcast. And we just had like an hour and change conversation about how we were feeling and what we were going through. But anyways, Andreas said, we made the gear and it featured over, 17 different heroes. And like you said, it was people like Ruby Bridges and Ida B. Wells and James Baldwin. And my hope was that there are people at home who might not know all these figures, but maybe they'll pause for a second and say, oh, I never heard that name. I've never seen that name before. Let me Google them. Let me look them up. And my buddy Andreas stepped in and said, man, this is killer wrestling gear, but this shouldn't stop at just wrestling gear. This should be so much more. So I connected Andreas with Jonathan Davenport, and the three of us kind of put our heads together, and we decided like, hey, let's start a Kickstarter and let's make a short film. And, Jonathan is so incredible because he's done similar things before. He's done stuff for Star Wars and Marvel. And I think his style of illustration is so beautiful and so eye-catching that it draws you in. And so the three of us decided to get together, and we love the story of Ruby Bridges. And we decided for this short film that we're going to do, Ruby Bridges is the person we're going to cover. And, one of the things that I love with Schoolhouse Rock is there are people, Schoolhouse Rock was before I was born, but there are people today who still can repeat to you those jingles. And I thought, why can't you have something like that, but with our heroes, with these important Black figures? That would be incredible. And because, hip hop is so much of the language, not just of Black people, and not just of American people, but of the world, hip hop is so much of a part of our culture. And I thought, man, what if we did something akin to Schoolhouse Rock, with the songs, but for these important figures? So Andreas is friends with Rhapsody. And if you ask me, Rhapsody is a 2-time Grammy nominee. She is one of the best MCs on the planet. She is incredible. And I was blown away when she said yes. So we got Rhapsody on board. We're using a studio called Something's Awry for animation, and they have been incredible as well. Their work is incredible. So it really felt like we were bringing the best elements to this. We were bringing the best in animation, in 3D animation, the best in hip hop to tell the story of this incredible woman. And I think one of the things that I love with Ruby Bridges is her story is so compelling and interesting because for people who don't know, in 1960, she was 6 years old, this little Black girl who integrated an all-white school in New Orleans. And she had to imagine just being a little girl, seeing a 6-year-old and seeing how, just youthful and just they're young and they deserve to be treated well, but to know at the time that people threw things at her, just this little girl who was trying to go to school, they threw things at her, they yelled at her. She even said in her book that there was that someone took a Black doll and a Black coffin and showed up at her school to use as a threat. Like that's a death threat. So to know the things she endured, and also to know this woman is still here, she's still with us. This wasn't many moons ago. You see some of the black and white pictures, but she's younger than my mom. She's 66 years old. She's still with us. She's still here. She has an incredible story. So we just thought she was the perfect person to tell the story. And for a lot of people, I think, this stuff is very interesting and compelling to me, but I think oftentimes it can feel very heavy. And we wanted to make sure it doesn't feel heavy and that it doesn't feel boring for kids. So that's why we have 3D animation. And that's why, Jonathan created this incredible character named Ettore, who's this larger than life robot who takes you through this futuristic hall of heroes. So the metaphor that we often use that I love is it reminds me of when I was a kid, and you would have applesauce, and if you were sick or you needed your medicine or your vitamins, your parents sometimes would take up the medicine, the vitamins, they'd crush it up, and they'd put in the applesauce and mix it up, and you'd have the applesauce, and you wouldn't even really know that you were getting the medicine and the vitamins you need. And that's what I want, and what we all want our Heroes Rock to be, is you just show up and you're having this tasty applesauce that's delicious. It's incredible, but you walk away with the nutrients and the vitamins you need. You walk away and you have this jingle and you have the story of Ruby Bridges in your head. And hopefully you want to learn more about her. It's just kind of an introduction, to her story. And hopefully you want to hear more of these stories. Hopefully you go out and learn more. But that's really our goal with this. And we're so excited, man. It's been such a pleasure to work on this and to learn more about Ruby and her story. And, that's what I feel in many ways. That's what I'm excited by now. That's what I'm fulfilled by. And I want to continue to do more of these things and to tell more of these stories of these incredible people. So we're hoping to knock this out the park and hopefully have this to you soon. But we want to do so many more of these stories as well.
So that's fantastic. I love the applesauce metaphor, man, dude. That's so, I think everyone can relate to that applesauce metaphor. So that's dope. Again, from my area in DEI, education is where we have to start, right? Some of these names, some of these events we did not know. I did not know growing up in Minnesota, St. Paul. I didn't learn these things. So I think what you're doing is phenomenal, man. And so the younger that we can start this education process, when they're 30, 35, they will already know this stuff and then can teach this stuff to their kids. And that's how generational knowledge gets passed down. So,
yeah. And I think it makes you more empathetic too. I think it makes you, if you're not Black, I think it makes you more empathetic to just the history of what Black people have had to deal with this in this country. And it also instills you with more pride being Black, because oftentimes you don't realize how many just absolutely brilliant Black people were. We're often fed this narrative that your only avenues to success are through sports or through entertainment. And it's not that. And sure, I'm talking to someone who works in sports and I'm in entertainment, and I get that. But man, there's so much more. And I think the more you learn about so many of these stories and so many of these absolutely incredible human beings, it just makes you a better human being.
No doubt. So this is the time that we are going to get to our question and answer from our participants, from our fans, from your fans, I should say, from your fans. So we do have a lot of questions to get through. We got about 15 minutes left, but I do want to get through some of them. So the first one we have from Matt Patton: who is a dream opponent that you have yet to face in your wrestling career?
Oh man, anytime I'm asked this, I always go with the one, the only Goldberg. I was a huge Goldberg fan as a kid, the WCW era. There's just, man, if you go back and you watch those episodes of Nitro, the place is going crazy for him. And I think that's what really attracted me to Goldberg. And I just had this fascination with guys who are larger than life. And to me, the closest thing to being a superhero was like being a pro wrestler and to being muscular. And that's why, that's why I started working out so young. It's just, I always loved that. And so Goldberg was the epitome of that. And the fact that he's still around, he's still wrestling, not as regularly as he used to, but he's still with us, still under contract. It's pretty incredible. But I also, one of the things that I remember too, and that's been a lesson for me, is I got to meet him. Man, this is in the 90s. This had to be late 90s. So we're talking about over 20 years ago when I was a kid. And I remember I met him, he did like an in-store signing. I remember being on the way to, my dad is a preacher, so we used to do morning services and then we would do an evening service. So I'm pretty sure, I want to say it was on a Sunday between services. And I remember I was in line, I got to meet him. I probably only had contact with him for 30 seconds tops. He signed an autograph for me and everything, but I'll always remember that he complimented me and my dad on my suits. He had a smile on his face. It was the most beautiful interaction. As a kid, I remember meeting my hero and he didn't let me down, So that's something I always think of, is oftentimes we're tired, we're jet lagged, we're in a bad mood, whatever it is. But, those moments you can have, especially with kids, those moments a lot of times is, man, we're so fortunate. If you have any kind of spotlight, if you even playing for Iowa football, you're a local celebrity. You really are. So just taking that time to be kind. Oftentimes it's not even necessarily grand gestures. It doesn't have to be grand gestures, but taking the time to hear someone, just the ability to be seen, to be respected, to be heard, to have someone smile in your direction, to be polite. I always remember that, and I'm so grateful. I got to tell him that earlier this year. We talked about that, and I'm very thankful. People can say whatever they want about, you might not be the biggest Goldberg fan, whatever, but for me, as a kid, I'll always so fondly remember my favorite athlete on the earth at the time was Goldberg, and I got to meet him, and it was incredible, and he was incredible to me. So, forever, I have so much love for Goldberg because of the way he just treated me so beautifully.
No doubt. First impressions definitely go a long way. So this next person asks, so you mentioned your love of college football. When's the last time you caught an Iowa football game, either on TV or in person?
Man, obviously I watched during the pandemic, so I was able to watch some Iowa football then. I have not watched Iowa football in person for a while, but I need to. So there was actually, I don't know if you have any friendships like this, but there was a bunch of us who lived in house together. And man, this is like 06 to 08. Lucas Cox, Rashad Dunn, Mike Sabers, and these are my brothers, man. We still talk. We have a text group. We'll FaceTime from time to time. I'm talking about we met in 2004, and we're still, like, all these years later, those are my brothers for life, and I love that. So we talk often about getting together. At one point, man, I would love to just have, like, just take a week off, everyone. Let's go see an Iowa game. Let's just get back to Iowa City again. Let's enjoy ourselves. So that's my goal, man. And that's what I love with Iowa football. Even though my career didn't go the way I wanted to, is I have brothers for life. And we had been through so much together, man. We took so many of the same classes together. We played together. We practiced. I'm talking about, like, you're spending almost 24 hours a day around these fools. And I think that bond of being in it together, there's nothing like that, man. And I'm so grateful for them and for our friendship because, man, those are my guys, man. And seeing my phone light up and seeing their names or getting a FaceTime from them is the best. I still, in fact, I play Rashad. I wake up, I set my alarm for 5:30. He's a school teacher now in Georgia and a coach. And we'll play UFC. We'll play UFC like Monday through Friday for about 45 minutes, an hour or so. But that's how we bond. We get on the phone, play video games. But yes, I got away from the question, but my hope is that the four of us can get back together. We can get to Iowa City and see a game soon, I'm hoping.
Rashad actually helped me out my first year in college football. Rashad's my guy, man. I love him. I love him for everything he did for me. So I really appreciate that. So we got a question from a 10-year-old, okay? So he said, or she, Colleen, sorry, who would you say is your best friend in the WWE?
Oh, man, I'd have to pick two. I can't split them, but Kofi and Woods, man, my partners for real. And I think a lot of times what you see on screen in entertainment isn't necessarily what you see off screen, but the bond you see between the three of us on screen is very real. Like I realized it because sometimes, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Yep. I realized after we were split on different shows, there are times, man, like I saw them on a pay-per-view because the pay-per-views are combined. So Raw and SmackDown will come together for pay-per-views. I got to see them, and actually I had to shoot something on a Raw day. I wasn't on Raw, but I had to go to the building that Monday. And I realized how much I light up. Like your child coming home from college or, that kind of, like, I really love those dudes because we forged something together. We went through the ups and downs of the business together. And those two, Kofi and Woods, are definitely my best friends in WWE. And, the beautiful thing is I have others I'm close to as well. But there's nothing like that bond between the three of us.
Absolutely. So this question is it ever a possibility to do a WWE show inside Kinnick Stadium?
Man, that would be incredible. If it was up to me, it would be happening ASAP. I know we often come to Cedar Rapids, which I love because Cedar Rapids is so close. I'll usually stay with Mike Sabers, and we'll just hang out for a day. It's awesome. I get to go, just about town, and so hopefully we'll get to Kinnick. Hopefully, I don't know. I think I don't know. I don't want to make any promises, but it would be incredible because I also need to be back to get a Pancheros burrito ASAP. I miss it, man. We used to have one in like up near in Wesley Chapel, I think, not far from my parents' house, and it shut down years ago. I got my love for Pancheros is real. It's deep. Pancheros, if you ever need me to shout out my love for, I'll do it for free. Y'all let me know. But yes, we need to be back soon. But I'd absolutely love to do a show in Kinnick. That would be incredible.
It would be incredible. So another question. So what are your thoughts on the current state of DEI in professional wrestling specifically? And what would you like to see the landscape look like in the industry in the near future?
Man, I think I'd love to do more. I think we can all be doing more. We do a lot of things as far as reaching out to the community, as far as like doing Be a Star anti-bully rallies or working with Boys and Girls Club. But, I think one of the beautiful things is as of late with WWE, if you look at the roster, we have so many talent from, so many different backgrounds, so many Black talent, so many Japanese talent, so many Hispanic, Latin talent. But I think as a whole, I think when it comes to DEI, you can never do enough. I think we can all do more, and we're all blessed, man. We're all fortunate. So finding ways to give back it's important to all of us. So I think we're all, and there are a lot of people who do a lot of things too in their own time. I know Bianca and her husband Montez Ford do a lot as well, trying to educate people and to be involved. But for me, this was something that just kind of tugged on my heartstrings. And I don't necessarily, if your heart's not in it, I'm not here to bully you into doing something or to reaching out or to pressure you. But I like to see more of us who have this on our heart to help educate, to help connect with people, just doing more of that, because we are extremely blessed, man, extremely blessed to just honestly just having a job throughout the pandemic, being employed, being able to do what we love throughout the pandemic. We're blessed, man. So I'd love for us to all step up and do more, and I think it's important.
Absolutely, we all can do better, no doubt. So we have about 8 minutes left, so it gives us time for 2 more questions. So one of the questions is, I'm a proud supporter of you and the New Day. I love the positive energy given off by you all. My question is, do you all get a positive reaction behind the scenes and with the crowd?
Yeah, I think we've been really blessed. It was a little bit of a rocky start for us when we first started. People would chant "New Day sucks," and we were likable, bubbly, good guys. But I think we were a little too bubbly, a little too pandering. But thankfully, kind of being heels, being bad guys for about a year or so after that allowed us to get more comfortable, to be more free flowing, and then we got that love. But people have been incredibly kind and incredibly giving, and I think backstage too, one of the things that I really love is, I think having love from the fans is obviously that's the goal, but also getting love from your peers, especially when, even people from other companies, when you hear like, hey, I think that guy is good enough to be world champion, to be doing this or that. Like, getting the respect from your peers is also something like that. That to me is also something that I have a lot of respect for. People that I have respect for who've been doing this at a very high level for a long time. That's something that makes me say, all right, I'm proud of myself for kind of being in that position. So yeah, man, we've been extremely fortunate. Granted, like, I'm a guy, like, as so many people have a love for wrestling their whole lives and always wanted to do this and start young. I'm a guy who came in essentially as a failed football player. So for me to be embraced by this community and by wrestling fans has been a real honor for me, honestly.
No doubt. Great. So here's the last question. And then after this question, obviously, I want you to plug everything that you got going on, all your social media accounts. Obviously, where can we help you send money, buy, purchase, whatever we need to do? But here's the last question. So it says, you hear a lot about the creative process in the WWE. And you always seem to do an outstanding job in showcasing your character and personality. Can you share a little bit of the process that goes into your effort to connect Big E to each member of the WWE universe?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. I think oftentimes our fans They want to see people step out and be unique and be individuals. But at the end of the day, it's a television show, and I'm not the booker. I'm not the person in charge. I'm essentially like, hey, this is what you're given. But one of the things that's been really important for me is I realized, kind of the reason that we struggled at first with the New Day is because we were just given something and we had to deliver what we were given. We had, whether it was the promos or how to do our intros, it's someone else saying, this is what I need you to do. And essentially, we just kept banging on that door and said, hey, let us sink or swim on our own merits, please. And when they took those reins off, that's when we were really able to flourish. So I'm someone who I very much I cannot just phone it in. Even when I want to, on the days I'm not feeling it, I can't be given a script or promo and just read it as it's given to me, because I feel like I know my voice. I know what I want to deliver, and it's very important for me. So there are definitely certain parameters where there's certain things that I must do, but there are other times where I'm, on a weekly basis, I'm fighting to represent my character and myself in the best way possible. And I tell people man, in 6 years, I have never just read a promo given to me as written. I always make tweaks. I always make changes, because I feel very much that no one knows my character the way I know my character. And it's important for me to step out and be an individual. And it's just important for me to sink or swim on my own merits, because if you tell me to do something and you force me to do it that way and I fail, I will always think I should have taken the reins on that. But if in anything I do, if I say, this is what I believe in, this is what I love, this is what I feel is right, and if I fail there, I can accept, hey, my effort just wasn't what it should have been. It wasn't good enough. But I believe so strongly in the New Day, in Kofi and Woods, in what I'm doing, that I say, sink or swim on our own merits, but there's no way that we sink. And I feel very much on my own. If you let me represent my character the way I want to, I'm not going to swim. And I tell people, I'm not someone brimming with self-confidence. I'm really not. I riddled with self-doubt. I've had the majority of my life struggled with depression and mental health. But the one thing that I've learned as I've grown, as I've matured, as I've gotten older, is bet on yourself. Yeah. I was my biggest detractor. I was the biggest obstacle in my own way. Yeah. But, especially with the short film, I've never made a short film before. I don't know what I'm doing, but I believe in my team. I believe strongly in Johnny and Andreas. I believe in our vision. I believe in the rightness of our idea, of our motives. And if we fail with all of that, doing it our way, I'm okay with that. But I just don't believe we'll fail, because passion takes you so far, man. Passion and real love for what you do will take you so far. And that's kind of my biggest lesson for anyone, man. Bet on yourself. Don't stand in your own way, because so many of us are our biggest detractors. So many of us are our biggest obstacles, and we don't let ourselves dream. We don't let ourselves man, there's so much out here in this world. Don't confine yourself to just what you think you deserve. There's so many things I've accomplished in my life that I didn't think I was ready for, that I didn't think I deserved, that I didn't think belonged to me, but I had to shut my brain off and I just take the leap. I had to tell myself hey, just be quiet and do it. I didn't what do I know about pro wrestling when I started in 2009? I watched as a kid, but I didn't know a thing about the business. And that taught me so much. Bet on yourself, take the gamble on you. As corny as it may sound, follow your heart, follow your passion. And I'm so grateful that I learned those lessons and it wasn't too late for me. And for anyone, man, there's nothing like waking up every day motivated because you really believe in what you're doing. There's nothing like that. And money is great, but it's not the end all be all, man. I'll take passion. I'll take self-belief. I'll take love for what you do on a daily basis over money every single day of the week, because our time here is not promised, man. You never know when it's over. And I just believe that we should all live the life that we want to. We should all craft out a life that is beautiful, that is fulfilling, that is loving. Man, the world is out there for all of us to accomplish and achieve everything we want to. And I'm extremely blessed. Like I'm telling people, man, I'm just a dude. I'm just a regular dude. That's all I am. But I've been blessed. I've been fortunate. I've had the right people in my life to help me. And I'm so grateful because I didn't do this on my own by any means, man. If it wasn't for people like Vincent Davis, if it wasn't for people like Mike Doherty, if it wasn't for all these incredible giving people in my life, just throughout my life to bless me when they didn't have to, who never asked for anything in return. If it wasn't for those people, I wouldn't know where I'd be. And my hope now is that I can be that person for people, is that I can be a blessing for others, because I've been blessed so much in my life. I love to be able to bless others in their journey too, because like I said, man, I'm so incredibly grateful for being able to live out my dreams.
Absolutely, man. And in closing this, I think you have the great words of wisdom that you just said, man, is do what you love and follow your dreams. And that's fantastic advice for anyone up and coming, young and old. Do what you love, man, and follow your dreams. So with us ending, please shout out your social media accounts, shout out what you're doing, man. And so if people want to give, they know where to give and how to give, buy merchandise. So go ahead, man. I'll give you the stage.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, man. So right now you can find me on social media at WWE Big E on Twitter and on Instagram. But really kind of my passion project, my love for right now, something we talked about, obviously, Our Heroes Rock. You can follow us at Our Heroes Rock on Twitter and on Instagram. The handle is the same, but we'll be posting updates. Right now, we're on the production process. Hopefully, we would love to have a merch store. But if there are things that, if you love the vision, please feel free to tweet us or to post on those accounts too, because this really is for you. And people who really want to learn more about Ruby Bridges and about these heroes and about these stories. So please, we'll take as much feedback as you can. So please visit us at Our Heroes Rock on Twitter and on Instagram. Please reach out to us. And thank you so much, man. I'm also, I'm on this incredible show that I love. It's on HBO Max right now. It's called Laser Wolf. I do the voice for Cannon Wolf. It's just a wolf with a cannon on its back. Vince Staples, Quinta Brunson, Reginald VelJohnson, who I'm sure you remember from Family Matters, unless you're young, but if you're old like me, Carl Winslow is the voice in the show. So it's so much fun doing that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm also on SmackDown, so catch me on SmackDown as well. But definitely, the thing that I love right now, Our Heroes Rock, visit us on Twitter and on Instagram.
Perfect. Well, to all of our participants and our attendees, thank you for spending the hour with Big E and myself. We really appreciate you. Last thing I'll say is go Hawks, and you all have a nice day.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Broderick.
Good seeing you, Big E.
Yes, sir.